Hey, good morning. We are live. I'm Adam Timm with the Healthy Dispatcher, here with my illustrious colleague, Tanya Lee with Evanscare. And we're bringing you episode 3 of Creating a Healthy 911 Environment. In today's episode, we're going to talk all about emotional health. If you were with us last week or tuned into last week's replay, we talked about mental health. So we're going to kind of parse these two elements apart and talk about what the difference is and how your environment, what aspects of your environment contribute to your emotional health. And if you find through this conversation that you could use a refresher, or you could do something proactive, we're going to talk about what that might be. Tanya, when we started exploring this topic together over the last week, I think we both were surprised to find that at first, I didn't really even know the difference between emotional and mental health. And you learned some really interesting things that you were sharing with me earlier. Can you kind of take us through what you discovered about the difference and what it all means?
Yeah. Well, first, I didn't really realize that they were not synonymous with each other. Emotional health and mental health are actually two different things. So that was kind of a big surprise. The difference between mental health and emotional health, they kind of work like a tag team. Your mental health addresses your ability to process information, and your emotional health refers to your ability to express your feelings based on the information that you processed. So going through this, I kind of realized that I might not be the most emotionally healthy person in the world. So I learned a lot, and I can totally understand how 911 dispatchers struggle with emotional health, because on a daily basis, they're experiencing over and over and over traumatic events and going on to the next one, onto the next one, onto the next one. And I don't know how you guys do it. I don't. So.
And I'm curious how you found the conversation or the topic of emotional health related to the fact that you are also a caregiver. You're the mother of many and a mother to the world in the course of your job as well. So as a caregiver, I find this consistently that caregivers are really good at caring for the world, at putting others first. How does that impact one's emotional health?
Well, for me, like I was telling you before we went live here, I've really struggled in the past week, and I could not figure out for the life of me what was going on. And just in learning about emotional health and kind of what you need to do to impact that, I've realized that when you're constantly giving and doing nothing else to fill back up that tank and you hit empty, that's when you kind of crash. And, I mean, every parent out there will probably relate to this, even if you have one kid or if you have 7 like we do. But just, the constant pressure of being a good parent, being a good provider, making sure that you're taking care of them, nurturing them, all of that kind of stuff, I really think has played a role. And I have this really cool analogy that I learned a long time ago, and it actually it was for relationships, honestly. And it was talking about a love bank. So you are constantly putting deposits into whoever your relationship is. It can be your husband, it can be your parents, it can be your kids, but you're putting all of these deposits, positive things that, good, healthy interactions that bring happiness. And then you can take negative ones out too. If you have a fight or if something bad happens, negative feelings take out. If your love bank isn't constantly being filled with positive and it gets down lower and lower and lower, you kind of experience an emotional crash. So that's kind of, a good analogy.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And I say frequently in my classes that if you don't put back, you're eventually going to start giving from a depleted state. And
Yes.
how long can you give from that depleted state? We have to really give from the overflow. And in order to put back, that's an emotional experience. And I find that as we give, And as we expose ourselves to the aspects of the job that are so challenging, and Melissa, in the comments here, you mentioned that there's more than just the traumatic events. There's the aftermath. There's supervision. There's quality assurance. There's leadership. There's the fact that when you are answering call after call after call after call, people aren't always very nice. They are not calling us to because they're having a good day. Our tendency is to kind of withdraw, and
Right.
that withdrawal is an emotional experience.
Mhm.
And I love what you were saying about the example, the important distinction between mental and emotional health. So you can experience mental health issues while maintaining good emotional health, and vice versa. For example,
Right.
struggling with mental health problem, like having little energy for daily tasks, you can still exhibit emotional health by finding effective ways to manage that lack of energy. So there's this kind of dynamic, give and take dynamic there. They refer to each other. And emotional health can help improve our mental health. Our mental health can help improve our emotional health. They kind of work together in that way as well. I'm curious, for those of you who are tuning in, how many of you are doing regular emotional health check-ins? Especially after tough calls, especially after tough days, especially during the pandemic continues. Yes, we're seeing some what's the word I'm looking for?
Lifting.
Some releasing of the
Yeah.
quarantine, the lockdown, but we're still in this heightened state of anxiety. When you go in and just barrel through each and every day, there may be a time to kind of pick your head up and check in with yourself and see how you're doing. Tanya, what was it that caused you to kind of see maybe that you were experiencing challenges that you didn't previously regard as challenges?
Just my initial reaction to pretty much everything is when I get overwhelmed, I feel really emotional. I cry, or I feel like I'm going to cry at the drop of anything. Somebody looks at me weird, somebody says something weird, and I could feel it. Like I can feel like I am not right. Something's not right. And I really couldn't put my finger on it. And then I started doing the research for all of this, and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I need to like make some changes. And so it was perfect timing because, figuring it out for myself helps me talk about what you guys can do out there too. So, and I love your story about Angry Adam, because this totally, you figured it out because of that, and what exactly did you do when all of that started impacting you so much?
Well, I didn't know that my emotional outbursts, my angry outbursts, snapping at callers and coworkers and supervisors, was also related to the physical symptoms of stress.
Right.
And that's another thing that I discovered the hard way, is that if you are bottling up your emotions, or you're passive aggressive, meaning you're occasionally taking out your emotions in an unhealthy way, meaning it's not productive for the situation, you are likely also seeing some symptoms of the physical manifestations of that experience too, of the stress, of the tension, because we kind of wear it. Like if you frequently wear shoulder earrings and a curmudgeonly look on your face, that's an emotional experience. So there's these indicators, and for me, it was the ulcer, and the indigestion and the tension headaches. Like I was literally in pain, and I was not sleeping well. And when I finally took the stress reduction class, which was a mindfulness class and taught me how to sit and be still, I learned that when something triggered me and I lashed out, that there was first, before that lashing out, there was something within me that happened. And the more keen I got at understanding how the physiological experience of that emotional impulse led to the outward manifestation, I was able to kind of interrupt that stream in the middle of that. But it took 7 years of bad habits to get me into the hot water that I was experiencing in order to find out that I needed something different. And I love what you just said. You said, I felt that something was not right, but I couldn't put words to it. I couldn't put my finger on it. And so often this is the case with the emotional dimension. And that's why there's a lot of talk about emotional intelligence right now in the business world, and in 911 specifically. The application is so powerful because emotional intelligence brings with it a learning of an emotional vocabulary. Most people don't really have a wide and deep vocabulary for the emotions that they experience on a daily basis. We basically can, if we're not trained, if we haven't done any research into it, we can both basically outline, I'm angry, I'm maybe content or happy, and frustrated, which is basically anger. So we can discern like 2 or 3 emotions, yet there are hundreds of emotions. Right. Can we tell the shades of the various different emotions, and understand what then is our outward experience of that emotion as we interact with people on the phones, in the comm center, with our families.
Right. Especially in 911, taking that home. I would think, I've never been a dispatcher, but I know for myself, like when I worked in the medical field, I would take things home with me all the time and I could not let them go. So that's why I would not be a very good dispatcher, because I would be a mess all the time. I'd be a mess at work and then I'd be a mess at home. So there's definitely some skills that you need to figure out to deal with that and decompress and let that go and still keep yourself healthy.
And I'm curious if you ever found yourself kind of numbing out when you were in the medical field. So something really impacted you, and you went home. Did you ever feel shell shocked? Did you ever feel like you wanted to withdraw or isolate yourself as a result of kind of a coping strategy, just to stop thinking about the emotional trauma?
I think that's my personal typical way of handling things is to withdraw. I'm going to just figure this out myself. I'm going to be alone. I don't need anybody to help me, that type of a thing. And, the release would usually be me crying. I'm sounding really super healthy right now, but that's how I would deal with it.
Hey, I just want to acknowledge you for being open and vulnerable. And this is a topic that is it's not popular to talk about. Right. In fact, there is a strong sense in public safety in general that this emotional stuff, we don't talk about it.
Right.
It's if anyone says the feelings word, the F word, we just want to recoil. It's better left unsaid. And it takes courage. It takes courage to be open and vulnerable about these very topics. So what do you think we can do when it comes to impacting or changing our environment? What are some proactive steps that we might be able to take when it comes to our environment that may help us improve our emotional health, or at least get an understanding of what we're dealing with on a daily basis? Do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah. So you actually had a live video a couple weeks ago talking about a lot of this type of a thing. And I had made a comment on there, which ironically enough is very funny now that I look back on this, but self-care is a thing. And I even said that self-care is important, or self-care matters, and that type of a thing, not really realizing, I was like, oh, that's such a good thing for me to say out there. But self-care does not mean that you're selfish. And I think I've struggled with that a ton, because I want to give and give and give and give. And I don't want to feel like me taking some time for myself or doing something for myself. It does feel selfish, but it should not mean that. So I do love this quote. I sent this to you a couple days ago. Taking care of myself doesn't mean me first. It means me too. And I don't think that we can be the best person possible without taking care of ourselves first. It's kind of like the whole analogy of putting your air mask on your face first, you know, on the airlines and that type of a thing before you start helping other people. You need to take care of yourself too. And as dispatchers, knowing that they're nurturers and caretakers and wanting to help and that type of a thing, I feel like that's probably the first thing that everybody lets go of. So self-care would probably be the number one thing in my mind, and also probably peer support. I think that that probably is key. I know that if I've gone through something hard, identifying with somebody who's gone through the same thing helps me more than somebody who has literally no idea what I'm talking about and says, oh, you know, I'm here for you. It's like, cool, you have no idea, you know, and it's just like, it's better if you have somebody who knows, like you're a dispatcher, you know the struggles and the emotional toll that it takes. So people can automatically talk with you about that and say, what did you do? How can you help? What can you do differently? So those are my two things.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to a comment here that I see in the string. Melissa, you asked, what if you can't name the emotion? What do you advise people to do on how to explore that emotion and what to do to overcome it? And it's not so necessary that you understand that you need to be able to put the emotion into words as much as you understand that there are different shades. So it may not be just anger and frustration. It could be a sense of indignation. It could be a sense of resentment. It could be feeling let down. One thing that I found was that by working the non-emergency lines, I had to deal with a lot of resentment. I felt like I had resentment towards the callers because it was call after call after call after call, and I couldn't relate to the issues and the challenges that the callers were reporting to me, because it was my 8-year-old won't obey the house rules. The ice cream truck is too loud. Can you have them move down the street? It's another loud party, and I had to deal with that resentment. And I had to kind of explore where that came from. So the outward manifestation was irritability and anger, but it was a feeling of resentment at not being able to read my book, or not sitting at the console, or not being able to play my PSP, which PlayStation Portable was before the cell phones had all the games and everything you wanted on them. Dealing with that helped me be able to show up and be of service. Our supervisors always used to say, just take one call at a time. Mm-hmm. And I was so busy hoping that I could just get off this call so I could get back to my book or get back to my non-work work. And the experience in that moment then was resentment, which came off as being rude and condescending, and all of these things that happen unbeknownst to us. Like, I don't think that any parent, any mother, any father who really loves their children would come home after a shift and intentionally snap at their kids and make their kids cry because of something that they're bringing home with them. Right. But it happens all the time. Why? Mm-hmm. Because we are complex, multidimensional beings, and there's so many layers. And if we're not able to explore those layers, we might just resign ourselves to say, that's just the way it is, as we check out and ride the magic sofa, as Dr. Kevin Gilmartin says in his book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. So thank you for that, Melissa. That was a great question. I do want to say one thing about your environment. One of the biggest impactors of your emotional health that we all experience, especially if you're a heroic caregiver, constantly saying yes and putting others' needs ahead of your own, is time pressure. If you experience a lot of time pressure, meaning you're running yourself ragged all day, every single day, that time pressure impacts your emotional health. If you feel stretched thin at the end of your rope, that's an emotional experience. If I'm always overpromising with my time, always keeping my plate completely full, meaning I've completely neglected my exercise, my eating well, my activities that bring me joy, then I shouldn't be surprised to find that I'm somewhat out of balance and that I'm not emotionally healthy when I create the time and space for that. So really, we need to make time to simply be with ourselves and to really understand where we're at.
Yeah. And something about that making time, people say I don't have enough time all the time. But I heard a while ago somebody, it just stuck in my head. I don't even know who told me it, but they said if it's important enough, you'll make the time. And about exercise or about planning out your meals or that type of a thing, you will make the time. We sit on our phones and scroll through Facebook how many times a day. You're making time for that. You can't say that you don't have time to do something that will take you 20 minutes to help you emotionally de-stress or that type of thing. Just spending a little bit of time on yourself. Make the time.
Yeah. Got it. You have to, or else it will be made for you when you're sick.
Exactly. And that was a surprising thing, like that you said, I did not realize, but emotional health really can impact your physical health. And, there's so many illnesses impacted by stress, which is because of unhealthy emotional feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you take us through a couple of signs that may indicate to us that we would do well to do an emotional well-being check?
Yes. If you can't remember the last time you really had fun, that's a good sign. If you frequently feel numbed out or unable to express how you feel, you're withdrawing from social situations even when you don't want to. I do that sometimes where I'm just like, I just don't have it in me. I can't do this. And then I power through and I have an amazing time. Or you're a catastrophist. I don't even know how to say that word, Adam.
Catastrophizer.
Always looking to the negative or how something is going to go wrong. That's another sign.
Yeah, and I find that many who work in 911 obsessively overthink. And when we're stuck overthinking and ruminating about the negative, we experience negative emotions. And it leaves us in this always on activation of the stress response. So those are all signs that you may need to take some time for yourself. And that brings us to the takeaways. So the takeaways for the next week when it comes to impacting your emotional health. Number one, see if you can identify the positive in situations and work from your strengths instead of focusing on your weaknesses or dwelling on the negative. What's the power of doing that, Tanya?
Well, we talked about this last week, and I said I truly believe that happiness is a choice. It's not a feeling. So you have all of the power within yourself to find something positive about every single day. We recently had a pipe burst in our house and the whole entire lower level of our house was flooded. And honestly, I was getting really overwhelmed, and eventually I just was like, okay, well, at least my carpets are getting clean, and our plumber was over here. He's like, seriously, how are you doing that right now? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can either be freaking out and be devastated at this, or I can just laugh it off, know that it's going to be okay eventually. And, my carpets were really super clean because they were under inches of water. So focusing on that, positive, pausing, notice how you're feeling. That's another,
I think we just lost Tanya. Tony, you mentioned the pit maneuver. When I start feeling overwhelmed, I stop everything and just pause, inhale deeply, and take a minute. And that's a great way. Just hit the pause button over the next week before you do or say something that you later regret. Just hit the pause button. Start to notice the things that trigger you from an emotional perspective. Start to heighten your emotional intelligence. And then the third takeaway, the third and final takeaway, is dare to schedule less this week. Schedule less, put less on your plate. And I'll go so far as to say, schedule some time for you. Schedule downtime, block it out. And if you flip through your social media feeds, and you're considering that as downtime and time for yourself, That's not bad. However, you may be consuming your bandwidth with negative thinking and just the scroll, and it may not be the most conducive for positive mental health or emotional health and well-being. So schedule time to just what's the word? Detox. Digital detox. Schedule time for a digital detox. That's just one thing that you can schedule time for instead of keeping your plate super, super full. And finally, please join us next week. We're going to be talking about physical health. So we've kind of broken down how our environment can impact our mental health, our emotional health. Next week, we'll talk about physical health, and be safe out there and have a great rest. Oh, wait, I think Tanya is coming back here. I was just about to say goodbye, but here you are for the final wrap up.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry. Bad internet. I don't know what happened there.
Hey, it's no problem. And CJ, thank you. This is a shirt that was given to me by the Holbrook Regional Emergency CC and my friends over there. And Valerie, thank you for this. One of my favorite quotes. Responding rather than react. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and a response lies our growth and our freedom. Thank you to Viktor Frankl for that amazing quote. Awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good to see you, Tanya.
You too. Thanks, everybody.